This is Pet Life Radio. Let's talk pets.
Welcome to Covered in Pet Hair, a boozy show for pet lovers on Pet Life Radio. I'm your host, Isabel Alvarez-Arata, and today I have the pleasure of having a drink and a chat with a dog trainer consultant coach that's going to help make your life so much easier. We're also going to talk about pet bereavement, and if you are not a dog trainer, not a pet professional, but you have lost a pet, you'll want to stick around because we have some really great ways to help soothe your soul. Don't go anywhere. I'll be right back and introduce you to our guest today as soon as we hear from these messages from our sponsors. Hi, I'm Isabel Alvarez-Arata, the host of Covered in Pet Hair. You know the expression, cats have 9 lives? Well, what if you could give them one more? The Give Them 10 movement is on a mission to help give cats an extra life. How? With spay and neuter. Spaying and neutering your cat helps them live a longer, healthier life. And it helps control free-roaming cat populations too. Learn more about the benefits of spay and neuter and meet Scooter, the neutered cat, at GiveThem10.org. That's GiveThem10.org.
Let's Talk Pets on PetLifeRadio.com.
Welcome back to Covered in Pet Hair. I'm your host, Isabel Alvarez-Arata, and today I have the pleasure of having a drink and a chat with a pet parent, an entrepreneur. She's a dog trainer business coach. She's a coffee lover, a tea drinker, a world traveler, and a Dungeons and Dragons nerd. She's originally from South Africa, now lives in Canada. She's dog mom to Fergus and her soul dog, Piper, whom we will be discussing at length. She is a second-time guest on Covered in Pet Hair, and she is the owner of the business end of the Leash. In her business, she helps dog trainers create blended programs so that they can actually live their life while also helping pets. Her name is Erin Moore. Welcome, Erin. It's so good to have you on the show.
Thank you so much. It's so good to be back. I'm really glad to be here.
I am too. I know you've been traveling a lot. I've been kind of following you a little bit. We're going to catch up and find out everything you've been up to since we last spoke. But before we do that, let me introduce our drinking game today. So anybody at home participating in our drinking game, anytime you hear this word,
the secret word is Piper.
Take a drink of whatever you're enjoying, but please be over 21 in the U.S. to partake. Never drink and drive, and always drink responsibly. So I know you're not a big drinker. So what are you having today?
I've got me some ginger ale.
The best. That's my go-to. If I'm not feeling a cocktail, that's my go-to. It feels refreshing. It's not too sugary. It's perfect.
Yep.
I am feeling like a glass of wine, which is often how I feel, to be honest with you. I love a glass of wine in the afternoon, and I'm having my favorite Pinot Grigio. It is actually, I'm going to share this because we're right around the holidays, and if you are a Costco member, the Kirkland Pinot Grigio is what you need for your holiday parties and celebrations. It's like $6.99, and it's a crowd pleaser, and it's one of my favorites. So, I mean, we all know that Kirkland brand makes good stuff, but this Pinot Grigio stands out. It's so good. And there's Sauvignon Blanc also, if you want to go a couple dollars more. Awesome. This is not sponsored. Just a little tip for you, boozy pet lovers like me. So I want to dig into where you've been, what you've been up to. And then once I know where you've been and what you've been up to, I'm going to introduce our first game. But I feel like we can't just dive into that yet. Can you give my audience just a little rundown of who you are, what you've been up to?
Sure. It ties in well with the bereavement topic because I don't think I would have done any of these things if I hadn't been in the place of grief that I was. You know, my life would have looked very different. But I've been in existential crisis for like 2.5 years in the grief. So I've been doing all kinds of adventure-y things, just trying to figure myself out and find out who I am and what I want to do. And I took a trip home to South Africa, and I was there for a month and a half, and then to Morocco there for a month, and then to Malaysia there for a month too. And it was, kind of trotting around the world and experiencing different cultures and meeting, so many amazing, incredible, kind, wonderful people who just are open to sharing their culture and open to sharing, their ways of doing things. I learned so much about myself, but about other people. I think it's a privilege, I know, but if you can travel, I think it's really important to do. We learn so much about ourselves and about how similar we all are as people and how interconnected we really all are, regardless of, where the birth lottery has us being born.
I love that. The birth lottery. I talk about the birth lottery a lot because I was born in Ecuador, but I was born to a very specific level of education and societal influence in Ecuador. So I recognize my privilege and my luck when it comes to the birth lottery often.
Yep.
So I know that you said that you were in an existential crisis because of bereavement. Would you mind sharing a little bit about Piper, what she meant to you and what it was like when you lost her?
Yeah, she was my absolute everything. She was the first dog that I had as an adult on my own. I got her right after I got divorced. She was the first healthy relationship I ever had. She was all of the big decisions that I made in my life revolved around her in some way. She came with me from South Africa to Canada. I started my first business because I was really tired of leaving her home, and going to work in corporate. And so I started a dog walking business. And then she was the reason I moved into dog training because she was getting tired of having all these other dogs around her all the time. And then she was one of the reasons I moved into coaching because she was getting older and I didn't want to be operating a dog training business the way we were told to and spending all of my time driving around to clients, etc. And I wanted more time with her. So all of these big decisions in my life were made in part, around her. She was my touchstone. She was my biggest support in everything and anything. She taught me how to have fun. There's I have a lot of childhood trauma stuff that meant that, learning how to have fun was not something that I did as a kid because I was too busy surviving. So she taught me just how to have fun and how to enjoy life and how to be in the moment and how to, she had such an impact on, she still does, she has an impact on absolutely everything that I have done in my life. And I tied up so much of that childhood trauma with my relationship with her in so many different ways. It wasn't even conscious at first with, I will provide for you the life that I should have had. I will provide the safety and stability and security for you that I never had. And I did. And, things she needed pushed me to do things I didn't want to do to get there, So she impacted every single area and aspect of my life. And when I lost her, I didn't know who I was without her. I didn't know how to function as a human being without her because all of a sudden I had to make these decisions for me. I had to make the decision about what I wanted, what was best for my life rather than what was best for her, what she needed. And just figuring out who I was and what I like to do with my time, so all of that was so new. And I'm still like 2.5 years and I'm still finding my footing. Yeah, I've got more solid footing under me for sure. And I'm more, but there's still areas where I'm like, I don't know what to do here. I don't know who I am here. I don't know what is needed of me. I would know what to do if it was for Piper, but I don't know what to do here. So it was incredibly, like my whole world just ended, and getting through the loss of the most important being in my life without the support of the most important being in my life was just this weird, messed up, like, I don't even know how to do this. So it put me in an existential crisis, but it shifted how I view the world, how I view business, how I view everything, and how I view relationships, what's important in life, what's not, what we spend our time doing, all of that stuff just was suddenly on the table looking at it going, well, that's dumb. And why are we doing that? And why am I spending time doing this? And what, so it's been a whole relearning process, as well as we don't live in a world that is conducive for pet loss. It's not something that people understand the magnitude of it. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of, let's just get another dog, or, it's just a dog, or, there's a lot of misunderstanding there around the level of loss, when the reality is like pet loss is often much more impactful for a lot of us than human loss. right? Because our relationship
Absolutely.
is different. She's the being who saw me at my absolute worst. Nobody else did. Nobody in my life saw me in that way. She did, She's the being who, knew me to my core because she lived with me every single day. And she went through all of those hard times. And that's not a loss that is easy to adapt to, especially not in a world where people are like, just get over it. You're not over it already? It's 2 years and you're still upset about it? Like what? That kind of attitude that exists a
Absolutely.
lot. So.
Well, I think a lot of people have that attitude either because they've never connected to a pet on the level that you were connected to Piper, or it hasn't happened yet. Like they will at some point get it. And I think whether you believe in God or the universe or whatever, I feel like life has a way of teaching us lessons. And the more we judge a situation without understanding it, I think the more likely we are to kind of find ourselves in that situation.
100%. 100%. I can, anecdotal evidence of my life is that the situations where I'm like, I don't get it. I don't understand why. And then a year later, I'm like, I get it now. Okay.
Exactly.
And I'm sorry for the judgment because now I get it.
I really am careful with what I judge because I really don't want God or the universe or karma to come back and be like, remember when you were talking all that nonsense? Come back to reality. Yes. Well, I love that we just talked about how it is sometimes more monumental to lose a pet than a human because of the kind of like the nuance of the relationship, which is very different than the relationships that we have, even with our closest loved ones of the humankind. And I want to invite you to play a game where you give me your opinions. I used AI to give me kind of like a comparison between bereavement kind of benefits and bereavement resources for those who have lost people and those who have lost pets. So I call this game This versus That Bereavement Edition. So I just want your input, like your thoughts on these statements. Here we go. Traditional bereavement typically arranges from 3 to 5 days of leave for immediate family members, whereas pet bereavements, when available, is generally shorter, with most companies offering 1 to 3 days. What are your thoughts on that?
I think that neither of those is long enough period of time for something that big, right? And it's just an indicator of how we value money over people in our society and expect people to just go through these huge freaking traumas and then come back to work like nothing happened 5 days later or 3 days later. That's my first thought.
Yes. Well, yeah, an immediate family member, 5 days.
Yeah. Like who, how?
Like your spouse, your parent, your child, 5 days.
You're not even over the shock of it in 5 days. Never mind even starting to grieve effectively. Like, no, I think it's bullshit.
And we should really include pets in that immediate
100%.
family.
100%, because they are our immediate family. Yep.
Yes. Like, I understand you not giving me 5 days if my mom's dog dies, but like, if it's mine, like, it is immediate family and I need to have the time. Okay, next one. Traditional bereavement leave is widely offered and often mandated by law in many countries. Pet bereavement leave is still relatively uncommon, with only a small percentage of companies offering formal policies. I found 3 companies, Kimpton, Trupanion, and Mars. And I have a friend who said that the USDA, because they obviously work with animals agriculture, they do have some, flexibility. So I'll shout out to those companies. But what are your thoughts about it being so uncommon?
I mean, it doesn't surprise me with my own experiences and what I've seen in the world around it, but I think it's, as with a lot of things in capitalism, it's very short-sighted because if you're expecting people to just push through something that they can't push through like that, they're not going to be the level of productive you want them to be. They're not going to be the level of focus that you want them to be. And they're sure as hell not going to be the level of committed to you that you want them to be when you're showing that you don't give a shit about this huge thing that they are going through and dealing with.
Oh my gosh, I can't agree more. Like, I feel like sometimes I have a stressful day and I can't focus, and it's not a huge loss, and it's not, something monumental, but like, I am just not productive. So what's the point of me being at my desk at that point? I've got to get up and walk away. And obviously I work for myself, you work for yourself, and we have that ability. But when you're sitting, and especially in like an office environment with people like chit-chatting and giggling over here, and you're going through this huge life experience, it's got to be so hard and so frustrating and so debilitating in many ways.
Of course, yeah.
The next one is loss of human family members is universally recognized as a valid reason for time off. Pet loss is gaining recognition, but many employees still feel hesitant to request time off without explicit policies in place. Like, can I get the day off because my dog died? Like, it just is a hard conversation to have.
Well, especially when we're in that grief at the time, right? Because when we're in that grief, we're also not thinking the way we would have been not in that grief, or able to handle conflict or rejection in that way, that where we would normally be able to handle it. We are at our most vulnerable when we are in that piece of grief. So it makes sense to me that people would be hesitant when they're in that place to be able to reach out. And again, I think it's bullshit, because we should be able to, all of our feelings, we should be able to talk about them. We should be able to express that. We should be able to ask for these things without a fear attached to it. And it reminds me of a friend of mine, actually. Her heart and soul dog, this was like 20 years ago, passed away, and she told her boss, I need a day off, and he was like, no, it's a dog. So she's like, okay, I quit, and she left because she just couldn't. And she was lucky enough to be in that situation, but she was like, I couldn't. How could I sit there? My whole world was shattered. How could I sit there and make sales for, like, I forget even what it was that she was selling, but it's like, it was not important. It did not matter in that moment. And the fact that they didn't value me enough for that time that I needed, they judged whether it was important enough, meant that I didn't need them. And I was like, hey, man.
Good for her. Good for her, because right now, this is actually the next comment I have, is traditional bereavement policies are typically well-defined and formalized, as well as an expected cost for businesses. They just expect it to be something they have to cover. When it comes to pet bereavement policies, which are often less formal, some companies can offer flexibility without written policies, but they actually can lead to improved morale and retention rates.
Yeah.
So it's a bad business decision to not let your friend take the day off.
Yep, it absolutely is. We're seeing this more and more and more just with the shifts in our worldview and since COVID, the shifts in how people view work and capitalism and all of that, where people are just like, we're not valued at work, so why are we going, right? Like, I have to work how many jobs to make ends meet, and I get treated like shit and feel like shit, so why am I doing it? And it just falls into that same category. If they don't value you as a person, why would you value them as a company?
Correct. Absolutely. Last one. As more millennials and Gen X individuals who have high rates of pet ownership enter the workforce, the demand for pet bereavement policies is likely to grow. I would agree with that. Would you?
Yeah, I can see that too. And especially in the Western world, where so many people in that demographic are choosing not to have kids, like an intentional choice not to have kids, and instead are having pets. Yeah, that absolutely makes sense to me with those groups of people, that there's going to be more of a need for it. Also, with millennials and younger, we're also more emotionally aware. We're more aware of how important it is to feel our feelings and express our feelings and grieve properly, rather than just suck it up and push through. So that also makes sense from that generational perspective.
Exactly. I know I hear a lot of older generations be like, everybody's stressed out and everybody's anxious these days. I'm like, no, you all were too, but you weren't able to talk about
it. Yep.
Exactly. We have the ability to speak about these things, and hopefully we have families and friend groups that allow us to express our feelings, unlike they did 50 years ago when it was like, I don't want to hear about that. Something's wrong with you if you can't get out of bed.
Right?
Shake it off and get up.
Pull yourself up by your bootstraps.
Exactly right. So tell us a little bit about how Piper's loss impacted you professionally, because I'm sure that, like we just spoke, you weren't as motivated to run your business and be an entrepreneur. It really derailed a lot of your plans, I'm sure. So tell us how it affected you first, just so that I think people can relate to what maybe you were feeling and how you kind of took on the few days or months that followed that loss.
It was like everything in my life, including my business, I wasn't quite sure what the point was. I wasn't quite sure what the point of any of it was, because what did anything in the world matter without her? right? Especially given how tied in with everything she was. And I think for pet professionals, this is a really big one too. Pets are part of our business, right?
Right.
They're on our business cards, they're in our logo, they're in the company name, they're on our market, like they're everywhere. They're business partners as well.
They're the
right?
reason many of us started it. Exactly.
Right. And so there's a level of grief there that was also different because I know for some people, like work is an escape from the grief and they're able to kind of go and, their dog wasn't a part of that. So they're able to just compartmentalize it. But for me, and I think for a lot of peppers, I wasn't able to do that because she was the reason for it. She was on everything. She was everywhere, in my business. And that tied with just the feeling of like, what is my purpose as a human being? Like, what is the point of any of this? Really made it hard to want to push and grow my business, to want to do like the running of the business stuff. And I had an unfortunate incident too, where there was some that happened with some clients like weeks after Piper passed as well, that just like sent me in a tailspin about people and, trusting people and relationships and stuff like that. And also formed another like barrier for me between, I don't want to none of this matters at all. All that matters is her. So it was really, from an emotional standpoint, it was hard to get my head to a place of, I still need to do this stuff because there's going to come a time where I'm going to come out of this and I'm going to feel differently. And if then I want to burn down my business and walk away, fine. But right now is not the time to make that decision because of where I'm at, So I really had to do a lot of work of like, we're putting this decision off for then.
Wow, that's impressive. That's very impressive that you had the kind of composure at the moment, for lack of a better word, to remind yourself amidst that chaos and that grief that it wasn't a good time to make decisions. Because a lot of people will just, and this happens to me where I'm like, I can't. And I push things away when they're too difficult. And whether or not I can pick it up later, whether or not I regret it later, I just kind of take that protection at that moment and maybe shoot myself in the foot as a result, because I just can't take anymore. So that was really great, because I do think I've always followed you, and I think you have so much to offer the pet community at large. Obviously, you work specifically with pet professionals, but I know that you have a lot of followers that are not pet professionals who just connected with you because of that pet loss that you really shared. You put yourself out there. You, instead of holding it in, really went to social media and to your work and shared your story, which is not easy to do, especially when you're in the throes of the grief. And I want to learn more about how you self-soothed, right? As the last 2.5 years have gone by. What ways helped at the beginning? What ways help now? But we got to take a break right here. We're going to hear from our sponsors. And when we come back, I'll invite you to play a game I've called Soothe the Soul. So don't go anywhere. I'll be right back with Erin Moore.
You know the expression, cats have 9 lives. Well, what if you can give them one more? The Give Them 10 movement is on a mission to help give cats an extra life. How? With spay and neuter. Spaying or neutering your cat helps them live a longer, healthier life. And it helps control free-roaming cat populations too. Learn more about the benefits of spay and neuter and meet Scooter, the neutered cat, at GiveThem10.org. That's GiveThem10.org.
Let's talk pets.
Let's talk pets
On Pet Life Radio.
Pet Life Radio.
PetLifeRadio.com.
Welcome back to Covered in Pet Hair. I'm your host, Isabel Alvarez-Arata, and today I'm speaking to Erin Moore, and she is a dog trainer turned dog training coach turned grief counselor for so many of us online, because she shared her story about her profound loss with her soul dog, Piper. And right now, I'm going to invite you to play, Erin, a game I've called Soothe the Soul, where I'm going to give you 1 minute to tell me ways that you would recommend a pet parent or pet professional who's going through a monumental loss like yours was with Piper, how they can find some kind of peace in the pain and in the grief. Are you ready to play?
Yes, let's go.
3, 2, 1, go.
Firstly is find the right people to be around, because there are going to be a lot of people who don't get it. And if we waste our time and energy trying to make them get it, it just makes everything harder. So find the right people who already get it. And these are the people who, it doesn't matter how many times you need to cry about it, how many times you need to talk about it, how many times you need to say the same thing. That is part of the process. Talking about it, crying about it, feeling those feelings, not packing it up and putting on a brave face and going, yeah, I'm fine. And then you're dying inside. And 10 years later, you can't even look at a picture of your dog because you haven't processed your grief. I did a thing that I call tapping a tear duct, which is I found a movie or a song that I knew would make me cry, and I put it on so that it could send me into the crying, which would send me into the grief, and then I could process and come out the other side of it. Because my instinct was, I don't want it. I don't want to cry. It sucks. I don't want to be in this place. But knowing that we have to feel it to get through it, right? So that's the first thing. Find creative outlets for you, whether it's something like taking an improv class. D&D, I cannot recommend enough for grief, because you get to role play out whatever you're feeling in a safe way. You get to say whatever the hell you want, feel whatever you want, do whatever you want in a way that really is accepted and embraced by, the people playing and the storyline. And it really allows you to explore thoughts that may not be safe to explore without the protection of it being in a game, right? So D&D was huge for that.
That is so cool.
Yeah.
Well, we're out of time, but tell me more. Tell me more. One more.
Therapy, if you can. If it's feasible for you. Like, again, just a safe space where you can understand grief, you can understand the process of what it is, because we get sold so much about what our feelings are and what they should be. And so if we can understand what the grief process actually looks like and that it's actually really normal, then that can help a lot. And don't try and forget your dog. Like, that was a big one. One of the reasons I dove into speaking about her so much was because how I had grieved previously was so different. I did pack it all up. I did put it all away. I did, because I just needed to move on and survive. And then I never processed it. Like, my mom died when I was 13. And I remember in my 20s being like, really affects me. I hardly ever think about her. Not realizing that that's actually the opposite, that it was affecting me so much because I wasn't thinking about her, right? And I didn't want to relegate Piper to like a memory of the past because I didn't want to feel the pain. And that happens so much for people. So like, turn into it and talk about them and keep your connection with them, because they're never gone. They're not physically here, but they're always here. And depending on what you believe spiritually, and I do believe spiritually that they are around waiting for us, and I stayed connected to that so much. I did some consultations with a animal communicator. And I remember, I have doubts about a lot of animal communicators, right? I think some people definitely have a way with it, and some people are just charlatans and trying to make money. But what I was able to tell myself was, it doesn't really matter if I get what I need from it. Who cares if they're a charlatan?
Correct.
Who cares if they don't? If I get what I need from it and it helps me, then I'm going to do it. So whatever things people might judge you for, if it's going to help you, go do it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the therapy also, I will say, I know that there's a lot of people who are anti taking anything to help you soothe, but therapy, and then telling your therapist if you maybe need some kind of medical intervention. And there's no shame in that. There's no shame in asking for something. I remember I had terrible postpartum anxiety, and they kept doing the test for me, and I kept being like, yeah, I'm good. But the test didn't ask the right questions, because if they had asked me if I was having any intrusive thoughts, I would have been oh yeah. But the test didn't ask about that at that time. Hopefully it asks now. So it's hard. So that's why it's so important to talk to a therapist that gets you, or a friend that gets you. And if somebody tells you maybe you need to see somebody about getting on something, even just periodically as you adjust to your loss, please listen to them. We have too much shame around mental health and mental health medicine and mental health solutions and talk therapy and psychiatry and all of that. It has its place. And pet bereavement is not the exception. Like, it really is not. I was so thankful for having, already been treated for anxiety when my Titan passed, because I feel like I did not have that kind of horrific reaction to his loss that I would have normally had. And I was on the anti-anxiety medication since my second was born, just because of the postpartum anxiety. So it's kind of a nice little bonus of being on that medication. So I definitely, use your resources, guys. Use your resources. There's no shame in it.
there's a fine line between using resources like that to avoid our feelings and using it to be able to manage and cope with our feelings in a way that actually allows us to move through them. So
Exactly right. Absolutely. And one of the things that I always want people to know is that it is just as monumental as everything else. So if you were to lose a pet traumatically, unexpectedly, the loss is the same as a mother who loses her child unexpectedly, traumatically, and you wouldn't judge that mom for doing whatever she needed to soothe her broken heart. So just remember that these things are available to you. And one of the things that I want to talk about too, as we end this show, is how pet professionals, and even if you're a pet parent listening, pet professionals, we really connect to the pets in our care. And sometimes it's not even our own pet that we lose and really affects us. I remember when I was a professional pet sitter, having to be there when a cat was put down because he had thrown a clot. His parents were traveling. I was taking care of him. I had to be present. It was the first time I ever had to be in a euthanasia situation. And I remember feeling so emotionally drained for months after that and having friends that didn't get it. So what advice do you have for those pet pros who really do get so attached to these animals in our care, and maybe the people in their life are like, it's not even your dog?
Yeah. Again, it's the same advice, right? It's talk to people who do get it. It's allow yourself to feel it. And even if other people don't get it, allow yourself to feel it anyway, because it's valid. Because the concept of ownership of a pet is so dumb anyway. Like, if you have a connection with an animal, it doesn't matter whether they live in your house and you're the one feeding them or not. It's a loss. It's a loss that you are going to feel like any other. And that's normal and that's okay. And make sure that you're doing all the things that you can to take care of yourself for that loss too, whether they're your dog or not.
Absolutely. And should their clients be like, let's say that it's a dog trainer who, works with clients one-on-one. What do they tell their clients? Should they be honest, saying like, I just don't have it right now? What did you say? What did you do?
That's where I was like incredibly grateful. I mean, if I end up burning down my business a year from now and doing something else, I will always be grateful that I had a blended program set up, because it allowed me to take the time that I needed. It allowed me I could focus on the clients that I did have, but because there are so many places within a blended program that they can get support that isn't directly from me, it also gave me the space that I needed. So I was working, the first week, 2 weeks, I didn't work at all. And I just told my clients and I was like, done. But then after that, I was working 2 hours a day just to meet my client needs because they were paying me for that. But I didn't need to do anything else because the business was set up in a way that took care of itself to do that. And it's sustained for till now, it's still sustaining, right? So that is one of the things that hit home for me why blended programs are so important for dog pros, because it gives you the space to take that time without having to sacrifice the money, right? Because none of us should ever have to make the decision, do I grieve or do I go and get paid? That is such an awful thing to have to do. And when you have a blended program set up properly, you don't have to make that choice. You can do both. So if you're in a place where it's coming because it's going to happen for all of us, but you're not there right now. Now is the time to make sure that your business is set up in a way that you can take that time without your clients having to be left kind of hanging and waiting for you.
Right. Right, because all of us, we go in to help the pet, so we don't want to leave them hanging.
Course.
So can you, for those that are listening and aren't really familiar with blended programs, can you describe them for us?
So a blended program, it's a combo of a couple of online components where your clients are doing a lot of the learning theory, the exercises that they need, the why behind things. They're learning that online and they're getting feedback from you via video, so that by the time you work face-to-face with them, whatever that face-to-face looks like, they already have that info. They already have practiced it. And basically you're spending your in-person time proofing the behavior with them and helping generalize it with them, and rather than sitting there trying to teach them something new in person. And so, it has benefits in so many different ways, but one of the biggest ones is your time isn't required for your clients to be learning, but you're there to help them through the process. You don't lose that personal connection that you have with them.
Yeah, it sounds like a really great way to get some freedom for life, because life happens. Like, you have kid, you have an aging grandparent, you hurt yourself, you end up in the hospital with appendicitis. There's so many things that can happen. And when we are, as this person who provided services for 12 years, I had a team and we kind of backed each other up. But a lot of businesses, pet pros, are not set up that way, where even if they did have a backup, it wouldn't be for a long term, right? Like they might have somebody to help them one day, but not necessarily for the weeks that follow this accident or incident. So it sounds like such a great way to kind of like have a little bit of an insurance on somebody's business.
So that you can take the time when you need it, because we are not meant to just work, pay bills, and die. That's not our purpose. That's not what we're here for. And just because we're in a helping profession where we get a lot of value and a lot of like our purpose comes from helping others, doesn't mean that we shouldn't have a life too, or that we shouldn't be protected to be able to take the time that we need when we need it, whether it's for an injury or family issues or bereavement or whatever. We have to live as well as be business owners.
The blended program will be there for you when you need it or when you really just want it.
Yeah.
So that's exactly. So I think that's such a great idea. How can my audience learn more about you? Please mention your TikTok and all the things that you do on social media so that, somebody can, even if they're not dog trainers and they're not necessarily interested in a coaching situation, I do want people to know that you're a great resource. Just even if they go back to the beginning and watch old videos and kind of connect there.
Well, I'm on TikTok, Dog Biz Coach. I'm on Facebook as well. Same thing, Dog Biz Coach. My website is dogbizcoach.com. And I talk very openly about business stuff, about grief stuff, about trauma stuff, I genuinely believe that, part of our purpose here is to connect with other people and share our real experiences so that we let other people know that they're not alone. So yeah, if anybody is, whether it's grief or business or whatever dog stuff, please come and join the community.
Yeah, I think there's such a human just connection to you. Like, I feel like even before I had you on the show, I could just feel how like really genuine, authentic you are and how you don't put up like this pretenses. You don't tell people you're okay when you're not. And I think we can all learn a lot from that. So that I just want to propose a toast to you for being that person, being a light and letting the dark come whenever you're feeling it, so that we can all recognize that we are all creatures of light and dark, right?
We are.
Some days are good, some days are bad, and that's okay.
Absolutely.
So cheers to you. Thank you for being my guest.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure. I want to propose a toast to my executive producer, Mark Winter. Thank you, Mark. And to our audience, I hope you found some peace in this conversation. I know for sure many of you related to Erin. I know I've been there. And if you don't get it, let's hope you never do, right? Let's hope that you don't ever understand what we're referring to in this episode. But I think a lot of you do, and I hope you find your healing, and I hope you soothe your soul. So here's to you all. Take good care of yourselves. Here's to a life covered in pet hair, because there's no better way to live. Cheers.
Cheers.
To learn more about Covered in Pet Hair, please visit coveredinpethair.com or petliferadio.com. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.
Let's Talk Pets, every week on demand, only on PetLifeRadio.com.